Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I am here to bring you a battle between two sealed decks from Zendikar Rising. Over here we have an Izzet deck, and over there we have a Simic deck. We'll be playing the best of 3. Please check the links below for links to the builds for these decks, as well as additional games that these decks will be playing together against the challenge decks. We'll go ahead and get started by rolling to see who goes first. Izzet rolls Snake Eyes. Simic rolls 7. Simic will opt to go first. Simic draws a Living Tempest, Rabid Bite, Tajuru Snarecaster, Bubble Snare, Marasa Brute, Island, and Taunting Arbor Mage. We're not going to be able to keep a one-lander, and so we'll mulligan and draw again. Now we draw a Forest, Might of Marasa, Bubble Snare, Thieving Skydiver, Shell Shield, Mountain, and Island. This kind of has everything that we need here. So we will keep this hand, and then we will take the Shell Shield and we'll stick it on the bottom of the deck. Izzet draws a Seafloor Stalker, Pyroclastic Hellion, Chilling Trap, Pyroclastic Hellion, Mountain, Solendi Vision, and Lull Mage's Domination. I don't think we keep this one because this hand is going to do a whole lot of nothing for probably too long. So we will mulligan. Second hand has a Glacial Grasp, Molten Blast, Risen Riptide, Mountain, Pyroclastic Hellion, Mountain, and a Pyroclastic Hellion. This is another hand that does a whole lot of nothing for probably too long, and is even worse than the first hand because it only has red lands. So we'll mulligan again. Now we have a Risen Riptide, Island, Shell Shield, Solendi Vision, Shell Shield, Pyroclastic Hellion, and Mountain. I think this is actually an acceptable hand, even though it's not a good hand, and we will keep it. Take the Shell Shield and stick this on the bottom. Simic will begin by playing an island, and then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet draws, gets a Rock Slide Sorcerer. Izzet will play the backside of the Solendi Vision. This is a Solendi Isle. This is a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for blue, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic draws, gets a Forest. Simic will play the Forest. We will tap both of these and cast the Thieving Skydiver. This is a 2/1 Merfolk Rogue with Kicker X. X can't be 0. And flying, and when Thieving Skydiver enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. We'll just be entering it as a 2/1 flyer, and then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Mountain, will play a Mountain, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Lull Mage's Familiar. Simic will play the Mountain, and then Simic will attack with the Thieving Skydiver. Izzet can't block, we'll take 2 and go to 18. Then Simic will tap everything and will cast a Lull Mage's Familiar. This is a 2/4 beast with tap, add green or blue, and whenever you cast a kick spell you gain 2 life. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet draws, gets another Pyroclastic Hellion. Izzet will play a Island, will tap out, and then we'll cast the Risen Riptide. This is a 0/5 elemental. Whenever you cast a kick spell, it has base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. And then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws an island. Simic will play the island and will attack with the Thieving Skydiver for 2. Izzet can't block, we'll take 2 and go to 16. Simic will hold up mana and pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Risen Riptide. Izzet will play a Mountain. We'll tap 4 mana and cast the Rock Slide Sorcerer. This is a 3/3 Human Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard spell, it deals 1 damage to any target. And then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Cleric of Chill Depths. Simic will play a Forest, and then Simic will tap 2 mana and cast the Cleric of Chill Depths. This is a 1/3 Merfolk Cleric. Whenever it blocks a creature, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. And then we will attack with the Thieving Skydiver. Izzet cannot block. will take 2 more and go to 14. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws an island, will play the island. Izzet will tap 5 mana and cast Pyroclastic Hellion. This is a 4/5 Hellion. When it enters the battlefield, you may return a land you control to its owner's hand. When you do, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. We'll go ahead and pick up the Silindi Isle, returning it to our hand. Simic takes 2 and goes to 18. Then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws an island. Simic will play the island. Simic will tap 4 mana and cast Bubble Snare. This is an enchantment aura with kicker 2 and blue, which we are going to pay. Enchant creature, when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature does not untap during its controller's untap step. Will target the Pyroclastic Hellion. The Hellion becomes tapped. Izzet gains 2 life from the Lull Mage's Familiar to go back up to 20. Then we'll attack with the Thieving Skydiver for 2. Izzet takes 2 and goes to 12. Then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws an island, will play the island. Izzet will spend 5 mana and cast the Pyroclastic Hellion. Go ahead and pick up the island. Simic takes 2 and goes to 18. Then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Field Research. Simic will go to combat and attack with the Thieving Skydiver. Izzet cannot block, will take 2 and go to 10. And then Simic will tap everything and cast Field Research. This is a sorcery with kicker 2 and blue, which we are paying. Draw 2 cards. If this spell is kicked, draw 3 cards instead. We'll draw a Rabid Bite, Balagad Recovery, and Cliffhaven Kitesail. And because we kicked it, the Lull Mage's Familiar will give us 2 more life to take us back up to 20. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws an Expedition Diviner. Izzet will play the island, and then we will tap 4 mana and cast the Expedition Diviner. This is a 3/2 Merfolk Wizard with flying. As long as you control another wizard, it has when this creature dies, draw a card. We do control another wizard in the Rockslide Sorcerer. This will also trigger the Rockslide Sorcerer, which will deal 1 damage to the Thieving Skydiver. The Skydiver takes 1 and dies. Then Izzet will attack with the Pyroclastic Hellion. Simic will decline to block and will take 4, going to 16. Then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a forest, will play the forest. Simic will spend 5 mana and cast Might of Marasa. This is an instant with kicker 2 and a green, which we are paying. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If this spell is kicked, that creature gets +5/+5 instead. We'll target the Lull Mage's Familiar, making it a 7/9. And then we're going to tap 2 more mana and cast Rabid Bite. This is a sorcery. Target creature you control deals the damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. And we will target the Pyroclastic Hellion. The Hellion dies. And then we'll swing with the 7/9 Lull Mage's Familiar. Izzet will block with Expedition Diviner. The Diviner will die, and Izzet will draw a card, getting in a mountain. Then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Glacial Grasp. Izzet will play a mountain. Izzet will spend 3 mana and play another Risen Riptide. And then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a forest. Simic will play the forest. Simic will spend 3 mana, play Balagad Recovery. This is a sorcery. It says return target card from your graveyard to your hand. We will return the Field Research, and then we'll tap 1 more mana to cast the Cliffhaven Kitesail. This is equipment artifact. When it enters the battlefield, attached to target creature you control. It has flying, and equip cost is 2. Go ahead and stick this on the Lull Mage's Familiar for now. And then Simic will pass the turn. At the end of Simic's turn, Izzet will tap 3 mana and cast Glacial Grasp. This is an instant. It says tap target creature. Its controller mills 2 cards. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Draw a card. We'll draw the card immediately, which is a Sneaking Guide, and then we will tap the Lull Mage's Familiar. The Familiar is tapped. The Rockslide Sorcerer will trigger and will deal 1 damage to Simic. Simic will go down to 15. And then Simic's turn actually ends. Is it untaps? Draws a Spikefield Hazard. Is it will spend 3 mana and cast Salinity Vision. This is an instant. It says look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an instant or sorcery card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. We're looking at the top 6 cards. We have a Skyclave Plunder, Glacial Grasp, Charax, the Raging Isle, Rockslide Sorcerer, and Lull Mage's Domination. I think of these, right now, Lull Mage's Domination is probably the best. We'll shuffle the rest to stick them on the bottom. That will cause a Rockslide Sorcerer to deal 1 damage to the Cleric. Then we'll play the Shell Shield, tapping 2 blue mana. This is an instant with kicker 1, which we are paying. Target creature you control gets +0/+3 until end of turn. If this spell was kicked, that creature also gains hexproof until end of turn. This will be the Rockslide Sorcerer, and because that was cast, it will deal 1 more damage to the Cleric. This will also trigger the Risen Riptides to become 5/5s. And then we'll spend 1 more mana to cast Spikefield Hazard. This is an instant. It deals 1 damage to any target of a permanent. Dealt damage this turn would die this turn. Exile it instead. We're going to be targeting the Cleric. And then the Rockslide Sorcerer will send 1 damage at Simic's face. The Cleric dies, and Simic will take 1 to go to 14. Izzet will then attack with everything. Simic will take 13 damage to go to 1. And Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps. Draws a forest. We'll play the forest. We need an answer to the sorcerer, so we will tap 6 mana and cast the Field Research. Kicked, we'll draw 3 cards. We get a Seafloor Stalker, a Living Tempest, and a Forest. I don't think this will save us, but we will tap out and cast the Seafloor Stalker. This is a 2/3 Merfolk Rogue with 4 blue. It gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It can't be blocked this turn. It costs 1 less to activate for each creature in your party. It is the only creature in the party right now. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps. Draws a Grotag Bugcatcher. And then we will just aim to win. We'll tap 6 mana and cast Lull Mage's Domination. It's a sorcery. It costs 3 less to cast if it targets a creature whose controller has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. Gain control of target creature with converted mana cost X, targeting the Seafloor Stalker. But as it gets cast, we will shoot the Rockslide Sorcerer's damage at Simic and defeat Simic. Simic perishes. On to game 2. For game 2, Simic will choose to go first. We'll draw our opening hand. Simic draws a Vine Gecko, Shell Shield, Thieving Skydiver, Island, Rabid Bite, Cleric of Chill Depths, and Balagad Recovery. I think this is an acceptable first hand. Izzet draws a Mountain, Risen Riptide, Charax the Raging Isle, Expedition Diviner, Sneaking Guide, Mountain, and Pyroclastic Hellion. I think that only having 1 castable spell in this hand and not being able to cast much unless we absolutely draw an island means that we should mulligan this. Izzet now draws an island, a Shell Shield, Molten Blast, Mountain, Glacial Grasp, and Mountain. Is not a great hand, but I think we're going to keep it because we can at least cast things and hopefully remove some things and survive. We'll take one of the mountains and put it on the bottom. Simic begins by playing an island, and Simic will pass the turn. Izzet draws a Tazim Royal Mage, and will play a island, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic draws an island. Simic made a mistake, should have played the Balagad Recovery tapped, but we'll do that now. We're going to play the Balagad Sanctuary side, which is land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap it for green. And then we will pass the turn. Izzet draws an island. We'll play the mountain, and then Izzet will tap 2 and cast the Tazim Royal Mage. This is a 2/1 Merfolk Wizard with kicker 4. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, but it's just a 2/1. And then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps. Draws a mountain. Simic will play the mountain. We'll tap the mountain and the island to cast the Cleric of Chill Depths, and then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps. Draws a Fissure Wizard. Izzet will play an island. Izzet will tap 2 mana and cast the Fissure Wizard. This is a 2/1 Goblin Wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. We'll discard the island. and we'll draw a Crawling Barrens, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Dauntless Survivor. Simic will play the island, and then Simic will tap 2 to play a Vine Gecko. This is a 2/2 elemental lizard. The first kick spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a kick spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vine Gecko. We'll also spend 2 more mana to cast the Thieving Skydiver, and then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a mountain. Izzet will play the mountain, and then we'll tap 3 mana and cast Molten Blast. This is a instant, and you can deal 2 damage to target creature, planeswalker, or destroy target artifact. We'll deal 2 to the Vine Gecko. The Vine Gecko dies, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Field Research. Simic will spend 2 mana and cast Dauntless Survivor. This is a 1/1 human warrior. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. We'll target the Thieving Skydiver. Becomes a 3/2 and will attack with the Thieving Skydiver. Izzet cannot block. We'll take 3 and go to 17. Then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Seafloor Stalker. Izzet will play the Crawling Barrens. Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Seafloor Stalker. Simic will attack with the Thieving Skydiver. Izzet takes 3 and goes to 14. Simic will tap 3 and cast the Seafloor Stalker, and then Simic will pass the turn. At the end of Simic's turn, Izzet will tap 4 and activate the Crawling Barrens. This is a land. You can tap it for colorless or pay 4 and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Crawling Barrens, and then you may have it become a 0/0 elemental creature until end of turn. It's still a land. We'll put the counters on the Barrens, but it will not become a creature. Then Simic's turn will end. Izzet untaps, draws a Sneaking Guide. Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Taunting Arbor Mage. Simic will attack with the Thieving Skydiver for 3. Izzet takes 3 and goes to 11. Simic will pass the turn. During Simic's end step, Izzet will tap 4 and put 2 more counters on the Crawling Baron without making it a creature, and then Izzet will pass priority. Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws an island, will play the island. Izzet will spend 3 mana to cast its own Seafloor Stalker, and then 1 more mana to cast the Sneaking Guy. This is a 1/1 Goblin Rogue with 2 tap. Target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. And then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws, gets a forest, will play the forest. Simic has 3 in the party, and so only needs to spend 2 mana in order to activate the Seafloor Stalker, making it a 3/3 unblockable. And then we will tap 2 more mana to cast Rabid Bite with the Seafloor Stalker targeting its opposing Seafloor Stalker. Izzet will respond by tapping 2 mana and casting Shell Shield, targeting the Seafloor Stalker, giving the Seafloor Stalker hexproof. No matter, Simic will attack with these 2 for 6. Izzet cannot block, will take 6 and go to 5. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Valakut Awakening, and then Izzet will spend 3 mana to activate its own Seafloor Stalker and will attack for 3. Simic takes 3 and goes to 17. Izzet passes the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Marasa Brute. Simic will go to combat. Izzet will tap 3 mana and cast Glacial Grasp, targeting the Seafloor Stalker. Izzet will tap 2 mana and cast Shell Shield, blocking the spell on Seafloor Stalker. And then Izzet will spend 2 more mana to make the Seafloor Stalker unblockable, and will swing with the Flyer and the Stalker. And Izzet cannot block and will die. Alright, we are 1-1. We'll be back for game 3. For the last game, Izzet will choose to go first. Izzet draws a Shell Shield, Salinity Vision, Rockslide Sorcerer, Mountain, Tazim Royal Mage, and Island. I think that this is an alright hand to keep, so we will do so. Simic draws an Island, Living Tempest, Vine Gecko, Island, Gnarlid Colony, Cleric of Chill Depths, and Riverglide Pathway. We don't have any green mana, and all of our good early plays are green. I think we will mulligan. Simic draws a Taunting Arbor Mage, Tajuru Snarecaster, Mountain, Forest, Riverglide Pathway, and Vine Gecko. I think this is an acceptable first hand. We'll go ahead and take one of the forests and stick it on the bottom. Izzet will begin by playing the Celindy Vision as the Celindy Isle null into the battlefield tap, and Izzet will pass the turn. Simic draws, gets a Cliffhaven Kitesail, will play the Riverglide Pathway. This is a land, and you can tap it for blue. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Expedition Diviner, will play the Mountain, and then Izzet will tap 2 mana and play the Tazim Royal Mage, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic draws a Gnarlid Colony. Simic will play the Forest, will tap both of these and play the Vine Gecko, and then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets a Crawling Barrens, will play another island, and then we will attack with the Tazim Royal Mage into the Vine Gecko. Simic will not block, we'll go to 18. Then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws, gets a Lull Mage's Familiar, will play the Mountain, will tap all 3 of these, and then we'll cast the Lull Mage's Familiar. And then Simic will attack with the Vine Gecko for 2. Izzet takes 2 and goes to 18. And Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets a Lull Mage's Domination, and then we'll play the Crawling Barrens. Izzet will tap all 4 and will cast a Rockslide Sorcerer, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws an island, will play the island. Simic will tap out and cast the Gnarlid Colony. There's a 2/2 beast with kick or 2 green, which we are paying. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. Each creature you control with +1/+1 counter on it has trample. They'll enter the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it, making it a 4/4. This will also trigger the Lull Mage's Familiar, getting Simic 2 life, and will also trigger the Vine Gecko, giving it a counter. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Glacial Grasp. Izzet will spend 4 mana and play the Expedition Diviner, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Turn Timber Ascetic. Simic will spend 1 mana and cast the Cliffhaven Kitesail. It'll land, it'll connect with the Gnarlid Colony, and then Simic will attack with the Flying Gnarlid Colony. Izzet will decline a block, will take 4 and go to 14. Simic will spend 3 mana and cast the Tajuru Snarecaster. This is a 1/4 Elf Rogue with Reach, and then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Sneaking Guide. Izzet will tap 1 mana and play the Sneaking Guide. Also, when we played the Expedition Diviner, Simic should have taken 1 damage, so Simic should be at 19. So Simic is at 19. And then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Forest, will play the Forest, will go to combat. Izzet taps 3 mana and casts Glacial Grasp, targeting the Gnarlid Colony. Simic mills a Might of Marasa and a Thieving Skydiver. The Gnarlid Colony is tapped and will not untap the next turn. Simic will decline to attack, instead will tap all 5 mana and cast a Turn Timber Ascetic. This is a 5/4 Giant Cleric. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life, taking Simic up to 22. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws an island, will play the island, and Simic should have taken another damage from casting the Glacial Grasp, so they should be at 21. And then Izzet will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws a Living Tempest, and then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet draws a Mountain. Izzet will play the Mountain. Izzet will tap 5 mana and cast Lull Mage's Domination, targeting the Gnarlid Colony. Will deal the 1 damage to Simic, taking them down to 20. And then Izzet will pass the turn. At the end of Izzet's turn, Simic will tap out and cast the Living Tempest. This is a 3/3 elemental with flash and flying. And then Izzet's turn will end. Simic untaps, draws a Seafloor Stalker. Simic will tap everything, and then cast Taunting Arbor Mage. This is a 2/3 elf wizard with kicker 3. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, all creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. We'll have it blocking the Tajiri Snarecaster. And then the kick will cause the Vine Gecko to go up, and we'll gain 2 life to go back up to 22. And then we'll go to combat, and we'll attack with the whole team. Everybody attacks the Snarecaster, and the Snarecaster will put the damage onto the Royal Mage. So the Snarecaster dies, the Royal Mage dies, and Izzet will take 12 damage to go to 2. And then Simic will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Scorch Rider. Izzet will spend 4 mana and cast the Scorch Rider. This is a 4/3 human warrior with kicker 1 and red. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it gains haste until end of turn. And then we will pass the turn. Simic untaps, draws an island. We'll play the island, and then we will spend 2 mana to move the Cliff Haven Kitesail over to the Turn Timber Aesthetic. And then we will attack with the Living Tempest and the Turn Timber Aesthetic in the air. Izzet blocks the Turn Timber Aesthetic with the Expedition Diviner, but will die to the Living Tempest. And that ends the 3 games, with Simic going 2-1 and winning the victory here. Those are some pretty wild swings in the games. Let me know what you thought about them in the comments below. If I made any rules and or play errors not otherwise mentioned, also let me know so that I can learn from your wisdom. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This is Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.